The Korean Mafia boss threw me out for his mistress. Then his billionaire rival took me in and made me his queen. The man who threw me out is watching me leave with his enemy. A year ago, he chose his mistress over me. Now I belong to the one man he could never beat. He called me the help. His billionaire rival calls me his queen. And tonight, the empire he sold his soul to keep is mine. I used to pour wine for his family for tips. I loved him. I thought he loved me back. He threw me away like I was trash. His family said I was beneath their name. They thought I'd disappear. I had other plans. Everything his empire hides sits right here. 3 years next to him, I learned every secret. Then I carried it straight to the man he fears most. He thinks his rival got lucky beating him. He doesn't know I handed his rival the knife. His empire was never as safe as he thought. This is how a thrown-away waitress became a queen. Step 1, the betrayal that finally woke me up. Step 2, the family that shamed me in public. Step 3, the deal that flipped all the power. Step 3 is where everything changes, because I gave his greatest enemy the key to his empire. Step 4, the day he realized what he threw out. Step 5, the day I stopped begging to be loved and chose myself. But to understand tonight, you have to go back 1 year. Back to when I still believed love could save me. A year ago, I poured wine for a living. My name is Naomi. I worked the floor at a private club called the Onyx Room, the kind of place where the most dangerous men in the city did quiet business over drinks. That cost more than my rent. The club belonged to the Yoon family. The Yoons were old Korean money turned old Korean violence. They ran ports, banks, half the courts, and most of the men who made problems disappear. Girls like me refilled their glasses and learned fast to never, ever repeat a word we heard. I was 24. A black waitress working 2 jobs, sending money home, sleeping 4 hours a night. To the people in that room, I had no name. I was the girl, the help, the dark-skinned one carrying the tray. And then there was Yoon Sung-ho. He was the heir, the next Korean mafia boss in a long line of them. Cold the way a blade is cold. Handsome in a way that made grown men go quiet when he walked in. Tattoos crawling up his neck. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. The first night I served his table, he watched me the whole time and said nothing. The second night, he asked my name. Nobody in that building had ever bothered before. It turned into a secret. Stolen hours after the club closed. Long drives along the river when the whole city was asleep. He told me I was the only honest thing in his poisoned world. He told me, and God help me, I believed him, that one day he'd put me in front of his whole family and dare them to say a word. I loved that man with everything I had. That was my mistake. I let myself believe a mafia prince could really choose a waitress. And because I loved him, I paid attention to everything. I didn't plan it. I just listened, the way a woman in love listens. I learned which judges took his money. I learned which cops looked the other way. I learned the names of the men who did his dirty work, where the real money moved, and which of his partners he was quietly robbing blind. Late at night, when he trusted me enough to leave his study door open, I saw the files, accounts, the secrets the Yoon Empire was built on. I never wrote any of it down back then. I just kept it, the way you keep things from the person you plan to spend your life with. There was one named Sung-ho said like a curse. Seo-ji-han. Seo-ji-han was the head of the Seo group, the Yoon's oldest enemy. Old money too, but a different kind. The Seos had spent a generation going clean, turning blood money into real banks, real buildings, real power. Ji-han was a billionaire the law couldn't touch, and he was the one man Yoon Sung-ho had never been able to beat. Whenever the Seo name came up, Sung-ho's whole face changed. I used to think it was just business. I didn't understand yet that I was about to walk straight into the middle of their war. The cracks started when the family decided it was time for Sung-ho to settle down. Properly. Respectably. A waitress was fine for a few years of fun. That's how they saw me. But a mafia empire needs a real wife. Old money. The right family. The right face. And in their world, the right face was never going to be mine. Her name was Lim Chae-rin. Chae-rin came from a powerful family the Yoons had wanted to tie themselves to for years. She was beautiful in that cold, polished way. Designer everything, a smile like a knife. The first time we met, at a family dinner where I was half guest and half servant, she looked me up and down and said, loud enough for the whole table, Oh, this is the waitress. How charming. Sung-ho always did collect strays. Everyone laughed. Sung-ho didn't stop them. That was the first sign. His mother, Madame Hua-young, lit up around Chaerin like a different woman. In 3 years, she'd said maybe 10 cold words to me. With Chaerin, she glowed. Finally, I heard her say, "A woman who belongs in this family." Not that. She waved her hand at me like she was shooing a fly. "Charity case you dragged in off the street." Then came the night he made it official. It was a huge gala at the family estate. Half the powerful people in the city were there. I thought I was just attending as his guest. I wore the one nice dress I owned, and I told myself this was the night he'd finally choose me. Halfway through, Madame Hua-young's voice cut across the room. "Sung-ho," she said, loud enough for 300 people to hear. "Explain these rumors. They say my son has been seen with one of the servers. Tell me it isn't true. Tell me you haven't been rolling around in the dirt." The whole room turned. The music stopped. And I stood there in my dress with my heart in my throat, waiting for the man I loved to choose me, the way he'd promised 100 times. He looked at me. For 1 second I saw him, the man from the river, the one who knew my name. Then I watched him put that man away forever. "Mother," he said, and he laughed. He actually laughed. "You think I'd touch that? Look at her, she's the help. She carried my coat a few times. That's all she was ever good for. A Yoon marries beauty and blood, not this." The laughter started slow, and then it swallowed the whole room. Chaerin floated to his side and slid her arm through his, and she looked at me over the rim of her glass and smiled like she'd already won. "Oh, the poor thing," she said sweetly. She actually thought. How embarrassing. Madame Hua-young walked right up to me until I could smell her perfume. "People like you are a stain," she said quietly. "You crawl into beautiful houses and you leave a mark. Get out of mine. And know your place from now on." My tray, habit, I'd grabbed a tray, was shaking in my hands. I set it down so they wouldn't see. I did not cry. Not in that room. I straightened my back, I lifted my chin, and I walked out through 300 laughing people, and the man I loved, and I stepped into the rain. It was only out there, in the dark, that I let myself break. They thought that was the end of my story. It was the beginning of theirs. I lost everything in the weeks after. The job first. Madame Hua-young made sure no club in the city would hire the girl who'd embarrassed the Yoons. Then my apartment. I sat in a cheap motel with my last $40 and let myself fall apart for exactly 3 days. On the 4th day, I stopped crying, and I started thinking. Because here's what Sung-ho forgot, in the middle of laughing at me. For 3 years, he'd let me stand close to everything. He let me hear the names. He let me see the files. He thought I was too simple. Too beneath him to ever matter. He thought the help didn't count. He'd handed a loaded gun to a woman he'd just taught to hate him. I knew exactly what I had, and what it was worth, and I knew exactly one man who wanted it more than he wanted air. So I did the most dangerous thing I've ever done. I put on the one good dress I had left. I spent my last dollars on a car to the tallest building in the city, and I walked into the CO Group headquarters and asked to see CO Jihan. They almost threw me out, a nobody with no appointment, no card, no name. But I told the woman at the desk to give him one message. Tell him I can give him the Yoons. I waited 4 hours. Then a quiet man in a grey suit came down and said, "Mr. CO will see you now. This is the part I need you to hear, because it changes everything that comes after." I didn't go to Seo Jihan to be rescued. I went to make a deal. Seo Jihan's office was at the top of the world. All glass and silence. The city spread out under it like something he already owned. He was younger than I expected. Sharp still. The kind of calm that comes from never once being the most scared person in the room. He didn't look through me like the help, or look at me like something he could buy, the way Sung-ho had at the end. He looked at me like a problem worth solving, like I was interesting. "You said you can give me the Yoons," he said. "Sit, convince me." So I did. I told him everything. The accounts I'd seen, the judges, the cops, the partners Sung-ho was robbing, the places the empire was rotten under all that gold. I didn't have proof yet. But I knew where every single body was buried, and I knew the empire well enough to know exactly how to dig it up. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You understand what you're offering me," he finally said. "Men have died trying to bring me 1/10 of this." "I understand," I said. My voice didn't shake. I'd cried all of that out in a motel room, and I'm not offering it for free. Of course not. Something almost like a smile. What do you want? Protection, I said. A new start, and a front row seat when it all comes down. I looked him dead in the eye. He threw me out in front of 300 people and called me nothing. I want to be a somebody he can't ignore when the empire he chose over me turns to ash. Seo Jihan studied me for a long moment. Then he stood, and he held out his hand. Miss Naomi, he said, I think you and I are going to win. I shook it, and just like that, the waitress everyone wrote off walked out of that building as the most dangerous woman in the city. His enemy had no idea I even existed anymore. That was exactly how I wanted it. The next year changed me down to the bone. Seo Jihan didn't hide me away like a secret the way Sung-ho had. He put me to work. He gave me access to people who taught me everything I was hungry to learn. Finance, law, how power really moves when the lights are off. I was a fast study. Turns out the waitress who memorized every order in a room full of dangerous men had a very good memory for everything else too. And slowly, piece by piece, I helped him take the Yoons apart. The first time, it was small. I knew Sung-ho was about to move on a shipping contract because I'd heard him talk about it for months. I told Jihan. The Seo group got there first and took it clean. Sung-ho never knew how. But I want to be honest with you because this part mattered most. I wasn't perfect. About 4 months in, I almost cost him everything. There was a deal, a port company the Yoons were circling. I was so sure I knew Sung-ho's playbook that I told Jihan to buy in hard and fast. I'd read it wrong. The whole thing was a trap to bleed whoever jumped, and the Seo group jumped because I said so. By the time I caught it, we were hours from losing more in one afternoon than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. I walked into Jihan's office sick to my stomach, ready to be thrown out a second time. I'd watched Seung-ho destroy people for far less. Jihan didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. He just slid the contract across the desk and said, "Then fix it. I'll sit here as long as it takes." That was the moment I understood the difference between the two men. Sung-ho would have used my mistake to remind me I was nothing. Jihan used it to remind me I was capable, so I sat. All night, takeout going cold, the city dark beyond the glass, and around 3 in the morning, buried in the fine print of that trap, I found it. A clause the Yoons' lawyers had gotten too clever with. They'd hidden a prior lien on the company, and been too arrogant to think anyone would be tired enough to catch it. It let a buyer walk away clean and claw back every dollar. We didn't just escape the trap. We walked away with their money. When I showed him at dawn, Jihan looked at me for a long, quiet moment. "You know what's rare," he said. "Not someone who never falls. Someone who gets back up faster than they fell." He almost smiled. Sung-ho lost the most dangerous woman in this city. He still has no idea. Something cracked open in my chest that night. Not the broken thing Sung-ho left behind. Something new. Every move Sung-ho made, his rival was already standing there waiting. Every door he tried was already locked. He was losing ground he'd held for 10 years and couldn't figure out why. He was being beaten by a ghost, a woman he'd thrown out in the rain. And somewhere in that year, something I didn't plan for happened. I started to respect Seo Jihan, and then I started to fall for him. He was nothing like Sung-ho. He never made me feel small to feel big. When I was right, he said so out loud in front of his people. When I disagreed with him, he listened instead of laughing. He never once called me the help, or a stray, or a project. He looked at me like a partner, like an equal, like a queen. There was one night, late, after we'd closed a deal that took a major piece out of the Yoon Empire. We stood in his office watching the city, and he handed me a glass of wine. The good kind, the kind I used to pour for men who never learned my name. "You know," he said, "people are starting to call you my queen, the mysterious woman who runs half my empire and answers to no one." "And what do you call me?" I asked. He thought about it. "I don't make queens, Naomi," he finally said. "I just refuse to pretend a woman isn't one when she clearly already is." He looked at me. Sung-ho had a queen pouring his wine for 3 years. He was too small to see it. That was always his weakness, not yours. I kissed him that night, and for the first time in my life, I let myself be loved by a man who wasn't trying to make me smaller. I didn't fall for Jihan and forget my mission. I fell for him, and I finished it, heart and aim both, never dropping either one. By the time society started whispering about Seo Ji-han's brilliant new woman, no one had connected her to a waitress who'd vanished a year before, especially not Sung-ho. We crossed paths once before the end, a charity gala, the kind of place where the powerful pretend to be friends. I walked in on Ji-han's arm, my hair down, my chin up, every inch the queen they were whispering about. And Sung-ho looked right at me, and he did not know me. He saw a beautiful, powerful stranger on the arm of the one man he hated, and his cold eyes warmed. He crossed the room to introduce himself. A man like that always thinks he can charm what he can't beat. "I don't believe we've met," he said. "Seo's keeping you a secret. He always did have good taste in things he stole from me. It took everything I had not to laugh." "We've met," I said. He frowned, searching, that ghost reaching up through a year of forgetting. For 1 second I watched him almost see it, and then his pride slammed the door. Because the radiant woman in front of him could not possibly be the help he'd laughed out of a ballroom. "I'd remember you," he said, certain. "No," I said. "You really wouldn't. That was always the problem." I walked away before he could answer. Behind me, I felt Chaerin watching, a flicker of something nervous on her face, like a memory she couldn't place. Let her wonder, I thought. They'd both know soon enough. That was the night I told Ji-han it was time. For a year, I'd held the pieces apart so they couldn't go off too early. Now I put them together. We picked the place. The Yoon family's biggest event of the year, the Garden Gala at their estate, where Sung-ho planned to announce his engagement to Chaerin and stand before the whole city as its untouchable king. I wanted him to lose it all in front of every person whose respect he'd ever cared about. I wanted him to look me in the eyes when it happened. The gala was on the grounds of the Yoon estate, in the golden hour, with a fountain running and 100 important people in their best clothes. Guards everywhere. Black cars lined up like beetles in the sun. Sung-ho in black, Chaerin in red on his arm, his mother glittering beside them. The whole family standing on the steps of their palace like they'd never lose anything in their lives. I arrived last, on Seo Ji-han's arm. He wore white, I wore black. The crowd went quiet and then started to whisper, because the Seo group's queen had just walked into the Yoon family's party, and that simply did not happen. Sung-ho came down the steps, all charm, ready to face his rival. "Ji-han," he said, "you've got nerve showing up here, and you brought your mystery queen, bold. I brought her because she asked me to," Ji-han said calmly. "She has something to say to you. I'd listen, if I were you. You're running low on time." That was the signal. Across the city in the same minute, everything we'd built for a year went off at once. The accounts froze. The federal file landed on a prosecutor's desk. The proof, finally, of 20 years of Yoon crimes, names and dates and numbers I'd spent a year helping turn from things I'd overheard into things that would hold up in court. The rival families got their copy and started moving on Yoon territory, before the champagne in the room had gone flat. Sung-ho's phone buzzed in his pocket. Then Chae-rin's. Then every important man in that garden reached for his pocket at the same moment. I watched it happen on Sung-ho's face. The calls, the panic, the realization that his empire was burning down around him in real time, and he had no idea how, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "What did you do?" he said to Ji-han, the charm gone. "How?" "I didn't do anything," Ji-han said. "She did. Every move that beat you this year, every door that was locked before you reached it, that was her. I just listened to her, which is more than you ever managed." Sung-ho turned to me, finally really looking. "Who are you?" And there it was, the moment I'd waited a year for. "You've asked me that before," I said, once across a room, and once a year ago, in this same garden, while 300 people laughed. I stepped closer. "I poured your wine, Sung-ho. I loved you. You took me on drives along the river and told me I was the only real thing in your world. And then your mother asked you to choose, and you looked me in the eyes and called me the help. Too common to keep beneath your name." The blood drained out of his face. I watched a year of forgetting collapse all at once. The woman at the charity gala, the ghost beating his empire, the waitress in the rain, finally becoming the same person in his mind. "Naomi," he whispered. "You don't recognize the woman you threw away," I said. "You never even learnt to. So I went and gave everything you trusted me with to the one man you could never beat. You didn't lose your empire to Seo Ji-han tonight. I let it land. You lost it the day you decided I was nothing. Madame Huayang pressed both hands to her mouth. And Che-Rin. Che-Rin figured out which way the wind was blowing in about 2 seconds flat. She stepped away from Sung-Ho like he was on fire. "You're being arrested?" she said loud, playing to the crowd. "You tied me to a family that's about to be in prison. My father will hear about this. We are done." And she gathered up her red dress and walked out without looking back, because she only ever loved the crown, and the crown had just turned to dust. That's all she ever was. And Yoon Sung-ho, the most feared Korean mafia boss in the city, the man who'd laughed at me in front of 300 people, dropped to his knees on the stone of his own garden. "Naomi." His voice cracked. His hand came up toward me, shaking the way mine used to shake, holding a tray. "Naomi, please, I was a coward. I was young and stupid, and I have hated myself every day. Don't do this. I'll give you anything. I'll leave the family. I'll spend my whole life making it up to you. Just please, don't walk away." The cameras were going. His family was watching their boss beg a black woman in a black gown on the steps of his own palace. The whole city would see it by morning. I looked down at him for a long moment, and I felt none of the things I thought I'd feel. Not triumph, not even the old anger anymore. Just a strange, clean quiet. Like setting down something heavy I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it had weight. "Stand up," I said. He couldn't. "You think I came back to take everything," I said. "I didn't need to. It's already gone. 1 year, and 1 phone call. I came so you could see my face. So the people who decided I was beneath them, before they ever learned my name, could watch who I became. I crouched down so we were eye to eye, the way no one in his world ever crouched for the help. That's all I wanted, to be a somebody you couldn't ignore." "Then stay," he begged. "We can start over. I'll do it right this time." "No," I said, and I stood back up. "Here's the part you'll never understand, Sung-Ho. The best revenge was never taking your empire. I let your rival do that." I glanced at the chaos spreading through the garden, the partners fleeing, the family frozen. "The best revenge is that I don't want you anymore. I found a man who saw a queen where you only ever saw the help. You did that. You handed me to him the night you handed me an insult instead of a future." I turned to one of Jihan's people. "The workers here," I said. "The drivers, the maids, the kitchen staff, the ones who carry the trays, they never insulted anyone. Make sure not of them loses a paycheck when this family falls. They're protected." That was the only mercy I gave that night. And it wasn't for the Yoons. It was for the people they never bothered to see. Because I used to be one of them. And I will never, ever forget what it costs to be invisible in a room full of gold. Then I took Seo Ji-han's arm and walked down the steps of that palace, past the cameras, past the guards, chin up, exactly the way I'd walked out of that same family's gala a year before. Except this time there was no rain, the sun was out, and the most dangerous man in the city was the one on his knees behind me, calling a name he'd waited a year too long to learn. I did not look back. That was 8 months ago. The Yoon Empire is gone. The prosecutors took most of it. The rivals took the rest. Yoon Sung-Ho lost the company, the houses, the name people used to fear. Last I heard, he's just a man in a small apartment now, telling anyone who'll listen about the waitress he threw away and the kingdom it cost him. Madame Huayang lives quietly in a much smaller house. Che-Rin married someone richer within the year. People like that always land on their feet. And me? I run a real empire now beside Seo Ji-han. Not as his trophy, as his partner. We built something clean out of the mess. Real banks, real buildings, honest money, both our names on the door. The people who used to snap their fingers at me to refill their glasses walk past our building every day with no idea who owns it. That's fine. I know. Ji-han never made me smaller. He married me last spring in a quiet garden, no 300 people watching, and when he said his vows, he looked at me like I was the most powerful thing he'd ever seen. By then, I was. I think about the girl I was, the one in the rain with her last $40, certain her life was over. And I want to be honest, because it matters more than the revenge. Becoming powerful didn't heal the part of me he broke. I had to do that myself, slowly on my own. A good man helped, but no man can do that for you. The crown was never something Seo Ji-han gave me. I walked in carrying it, the day I decided I was worth more than the insult he threw at me. He just had the eyes to see it, So let me leave you with this. Have people ever decided what you were worth before they bothered to learn your name? Has someone ever thrown you away like you were nothing? Only for you to become the very thing they'll spend the rest of their lives explaining. Here's what those palace steps taught me. The people who throw you out when you're down are showing you exactly who they are. Believe them the first time. Then stop begging to be valued by anyone who's already decided you're beneath them. Walk away, build your own kingdom, and when love finds you again, make sure it's the kind that lifts you up to stand beside it, not the kind that needs you on your knees. The man who called me the help made me feel like nothing, so I went out and became a queen. Not for him, not even for revenge. For me. And the day he finally fell to his knees and begged me to stay. The most powerful thing I have ever done was keep on walking. Before you go, give Naomi the respect Sangho never gave her. Like this video, subscribe to Mafia Heartbeat, and comment, "I kept walking" if you believe the woman they threw away can still become a queen. Because the next woman they underestimate is holding an even bigger secret, and you are not going to want to miss the night it all comes out.